صباح ناصر. Good to see you.
Hello, Nadim. كيفك?
Good, good.
Very good. Thank you for inviting me.
لا, thank you for joining. ويعطيك ألف عافية.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, I think.
احنا هنحكي عربي أنا ولا بدك يعني إنجليش؟ شو ال What's the
هاي مرحبا. هاي لا راح يكون عربي وإنجليزي. There will be live interpretation. راح يكون في ترجمة فورية اللي بيحب. يلا نحن بس بعد دقيقة ومنبلش. بس اللي بيحبوا يستعملوا الانتربريتيشن اوبشن فيهم يوصلوا لها تحت على اليمين. For those who would like to use interpretation, you can pick the option in the tab below. We're gonna start very soon.
Chris, hear me now?
Hi, Anna. We hear you a bit better.
Maybe it'll be down.
Hello, أنا كيفك؟
Anna is having technical difficulties.
Hear me? Okay. Nadim, please say the welcoming words on behalf of both of us.
All right. أنا بقترح لكن أنا ما هحكي كثير بس كان بدي أرحب بالجميع. وهاي أنا. We can see you now briefly. أنا اسمي نديم حوري.
Hello everyone, I'm Nadim Houri. Welcome to this webinar. I'm the Executive Director of the Arab Reform Initiative. I would like to thank you for joining this webinar. This will be an extremely interesting webinar. We will be tackling an issue we've been suffering from for a long time in Lebanon, so managing solid waste management. The Arab Reform Initiative is organizing this webinar in cooperation with the Heinrich Ball, and in my name and in the name of Anna, I would like to welcome all the speakers. Christophe Maroon from HBS will be the moderator of this webinar. I just wanted to take this first 2 minutes to welcome you. Anna is present with us on the call, but she's having internet connection problems. This is why we can't hear her clearly. Thank you, everyone. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of this webinar. We would like to thank Minister Nasser Yassin for joining this webinar. Christophe Maroon, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. We will be tackling the waste management governance in Lebanon issue. We are organizing this webinar in the framework of a series of webinars organized in cooperation between ARI and the HBS. This is another webinar, the second webinar about waste management governance in Lebanon and potential reforms. We had talked about advocacy before that during the first webinar. I'm Christophe Maroon, Program Manager of Environmental Justice in Heinrich Ball. I will be moderating today's discussion. Before discussing the details, I would like to introduce the speakers of today's webinar. We will have first Dr. Nasser Yassin, the Lebanese Minister of Environment. Ever since September 2021, he has been a former professor at the American University of Beirut. Dr. Yassin will be talking about the national strategy for managing solid waste. We will give the floor after that to Mrs. Cynthia Kreidy, Project Coordinator and Environmental and Sustainable Development Unit at the AUB. She will be presenting a paper she has been working on with ARR and HBS, and this paper will be published very soon. This paper sheds light on governance, waste management governance, the role of different authorities, municipalities, different official entities, and their role in trying to finding solutions to this crisis. We will give the floor after that to Dr. Amani Maalouf, a postdoctoral researcher in environmental engineering in Oxford and the UK. She will be talking about the circular economy and waste management. Dr. Amani will talk mainly about the waste management and the waste sector in the world, and we will be talking about Lebanon and other developing countries. We will have a Q&A session, a discussions session, by the end of this webinar. You can either write down your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. We have as well interpretation if you're interested. We will give the floor first to His Excellency Mr. Nasser Yassin, Lebanese Minister of Environment. The floor is yours, Mr. Nasser Yassin. Thank you, Christophe. Thank you, Nadim, Sareen, all ARI team. I would like to thank Anna and her team. I would like to thank HBS. It is very important to hold similar discussions about solid waste. This has been a topic that has been discussed for years and years now in Lebanon, and Lebanon hasn't been able to solve this problem yet. When I talk about Lebanon, I talk about different official entities, municipalities, communities, and how different stakeholders, different entities failed to solve this problem. I will be shedding light on some important issues. I will be talking about the programs implemented by the Ministry of Environment. The ministry has been implementing a plan ever since 2019, but we have fine-tuned it, we have improved it. In light of the economic and financial crisis the country is going through, I will be sharing my PowerPoint presentation. I have already showed this presentation during previous sessions held by the government and in the parliament and in various workshops. As you can see, we cannot but adopt the circular economy model in order to solve this problem. This should be the pillar that can help us design any public policy and implement any public policy. As you can see, we need an integrated management of solid waste. I'm sorry, we have a problem hearing Mr. Yassin. As you can see, this is the estimated cost that can help us manage this crisis. you can see the different details related to the collection, to the triage, recycling, etc. What about the current situation? In 2018, there was 7,000 tons of waste per day, including the waste produced by refugees and displaced. Some indicators have shown that this quantity has been reduced by approximately 20%. So we have around 5,600 tons of waste per day, so around 2 million tons per year. You can see here how Lebanon is divided, the governorates, the Kazas. This is a 2018 map, but we can have or calculate approximately these figures based on the estimations. These are the various components of waste in Lebanon. This is not a recent study, but it gives us an overview of the situation. You can see the percentage of paper, cardboard, steel, plastic, glass, and other kinds of waste, in addition to organic waste, around 54%. And we cannot but build on these figures when we talk later on the importance of sorting at the source. So this is how the waste is divided, if you could say so, in Lebanon. This is the state of the environment report, 2020 state of the environment report. So you can see here the different kinds of waste, how this waste is treated, is managed. And we can see that many or a large quantity of this waste is being disposed of in an unorganized way. And after the Beirut port explosion, we've been suffering from additional problems. All these technical issues are details that experts know, that people who are following up on this issue know about. So many of you know about all these figures. But the main problem related to waste management, solid waste management, is related to the governance and the management of solid waste. So the major problem is related to the governance of this sector and to the management of solid waste. First of all, we have more than one administration taking care of that topic. So we have the Council of Reconstruction and Development, that is the managing part of that issue of the waste, mainly the landfills. Many projects have been developed, some of them in cooperation with the European Union. In certain cases, the municipalities and federations of municipalities are taking care of or are managing waste. So since we have more than one authority handling the management of solid waste, we weren't able to find the right solution, or we weren't able to have a good governance in this sector. Some consultants and some friends say that the minister and the Ministry of Environment cannot do anything and cannot truly find solutions to solid waste management. But truth be told, the Ministry of Environment cannot but be involved in finding a good solution to this problem. We have assumed this responsibility, and as a ministry, we're working with other administrations, with other authorities, in order to well organize the management of this sector. In addition to AMSAR and municipalities that are managing certain parts of waste management, we have other plants that are managing as well waste. And you can see that these plants are present in more than one region. In addition to that, many regulations, many laws stress on the importance of the role of the Ministry of Environment, and we can have a good organization of solid waste management if we build on these laws, on these regulations. We have developed 7 strategic objectives or orientations. These stress on the role of the Ministry of Environment, the implementation of the law 80/2018. So this law is not bad at all. We can build on it, we can improve it and build on it in order to find better ways as well to implement it. It is very important to have an authority that can be a hybrid authority that can help design policies and implement the policies. During the past month, we've been working hard in order to develop the executive decrees that can help us launch the work of this authority. And it is very important to finalize everything related to that authority, and the other minister and the other government that will be appointed after the elections can nominate the members of this authority. So we have a disintegrated reality, if you could say so, situation. Eventually, when everything related to the authority is finalized, it can start developing bylaws, terms and conditions, plans, projects, programs, mainly those that can be implemented by the different municipalities, and it can govern as well the role of different municipalities. It can as well control the implementation of that law, and it can later work on data, have good data collection, a waste management system, an information system, and a system that is updated. These are some of the laws, regulations that have been drafted. There are some unified criteria as well related to sorting, and some execution decrees related to different laws, as you can see. After reading Cynthia's paper and other papers, we notice that in certain cases, these laws, these regulations are not mentioned, knowing that this is a major pillar that can help us work on solid waste management. We cannot say that the Ministry of Environment is not doing anything or the government is not doing anything. And here I'm not talking about Cynthia's paper in particular, but in general, we cannot disregard the fact that the Ministry of Environment and that the government is working on designing an efficient plan. We will be stressing as well on the promotion of decentralization. This is a role that municipalities eventually can assume. We can work as regulators, we can follow up on everything that is being done. We have good assessments. However, municipalities should work practically on the ground on having a good management for its waste. So we have a role to play, but municipalities and federations of municipalities have a major role to play as well. It is very important as well to shift from theory to practice, and therefore we should empower municipalities, give them the resources needed for them to be able to work on the management of waste. And this is why we have been discussing the allocation of budgets for municipalities for them to be able to manage waste. We should organize the waste streams as well. There are different waste streams, and we're trying to work on every stream. We're trying to have more reception areas, if we could say so. We're stressing more on our drop-off centers. We're stressing on mainly on cardboards, plastic, and other sorts of metals. We are working now with the UMSAR in order to work again on all the plants, the existing plants. We should be able as well to work on the compost plants. We're finalizing the agreement with the IMF in order to launch again the work in the different plants, whether in Costa Brava or mainly in Al Ghadir, the compost factory or plant in Al Ghadir. This is part of our strategy. We hope as well that we will be able to work more on improving the work done by the different centers. Eventually, we will try to transform this waste, find alternative or be able at least to produce some kind of alternative fuel from this waste. Of course, this is a long-term plan, but it is very important to be able to develop very strict conditions and rules if we were, or if plants were to work on that. We will have a monitoring of the air quality if, of course, we implement that plan. It is very important to talk about that, about the possibility of producing alternative fuel from this waste, and this might be a way of reducing the quantities of waste. So yes, we're against arbitrary incineration, if we could say so. However, we can work on developing a good plan to produce alternative fuel from waste. Even if we work on a zero waste plan, we still need to have a plan for landfills, and these sanitary landfills should be well organized. Very high standards should be implemented. In Name landfill, we're trying to work on that now, on having a better standard. And we have another strategic orientation. So the seventh strategic orientation is axed around closing and rehabilitating the different arbitrary landfills. You can see here the different landfills in Lebanon. We cannot stop working in these landfills unless we promote the work of municipalities, unless we empower municipalities. We need to work more on the local level if we were to close these landfills. We're working with different partners, with different stakeholders, civil society organizations, international donors as well. We're stressing on the good governance of the waste sector, sorting as well, organizing waste streams, reinforce the role of different municipalities and federations of municipalities, and the aim would be gradually to close these landfills, arbitrary landfills. I will stay here until 4:20 if you have any questions for me, and thank you, Christophe, for giving me some additional time. Before giving the floor to Mrs. Cynthia, I would like to remind you, if you have any questions, write them in the Q&A box so that we can have all the questions in front of us and so that we can answer all your questions. Thank you. We will give the floor now to Cynthia Kreidy. Cynthia, the floor is yours. Thank you, Christophe. I would like to thank HBS and Ari for this invitation. Thank you for hosting us and for the work we've been doing together recently. I will be speaking in English because I have prepared my PowerPoint presentation in English.
I will share my screen. Okay. So today I will be presenting very briefly the results of the paper that I've been working on, which is entitled Unpacking Solid Waste Management Policies in Lebanon, Public Policies Based on Power Sharing Politics Rather than Evidence-Based Decision Making. So fortunately, the picture we've seen in the first slide is a recent picture a couple of months ago. We've been seeing this scenery, observing this incident intermittently on the streets of Beirut and Mount Lebanon. And this shows how fragile the solid waste management system is overall. So whenever there is I'm not talking about the major crisis in 2015, but even nowadays, whenever there is even the slightest disturbance, we observe the repercussions on the solid waste systems. So with the increase in fuel prices, we've been observing less collection of solid waste and so on, which is leading to piling up of garbage again. So whenever we are talking about solid waste, we're not talking only about an environmental problem. The cost of unregulated solid waste management has negative impacts due to open dumping and burning that people resort to whenever there's accumulation of waste on the street to get rid of these piles of garbage. And this causes skin problems, cancer, heart diseases, and also bad mental health. It causes a lot of stress and anxiety for people to be living and walking on the streets and observing these sceneries. It also disproportionately impacts marginalized community, and we've had a lot of discussions and research done on this actually, especially for communities that are living close by to the open dumps and so on. Burning sites are often close to them, as I mentioned, and they cannot afford proper health care due to the bad consequences of these unregulated practices. Also, the estimated cost of environmental degradation was estimated to be about $66.5 million in 2012 and $200 million in 2018 in Lebanon. So whenever we are not spending or investing enough resources to regulate the sector, we are observing in parallel other sectors, the cost of environmental degradation due to the repercussions of these unregulated practices. And finally, of course, last but not least, we have the increase in greenhouse gas emissions. Around 10% of the country's greenhouse gas emissions in 2011 were largely due to open dumping and burning. And I can only imagine how this number has increased following the crisis in 2015 and even today. So as Minister Nasser Yassin mentioned, in the paper, we have like a retrospective of all the environmental policies, strategies, plans that were set in place throughout the years. So we start around 1975, a bit before that, and we go all the way up until today. We've seen that many plans and laws were even drafted. However, up until today, we still don't have a solution to this problem. Every now and then we have a crisis, and the crisis started in the mid-90s actually, so it's not recent. It's not in 2015 or 2016. So what the paper actually investigates and asks is, so we've had several ministries of environment and other relevant ministries that work on this issue, and they've drafted plans, laws, and regulations. However, we still have a problem. So why do we still have a problem? Minister Nasser Yassin talked about this. So we need to have an integrated solid waste management strategy, which is the only solution. And it needs to be coupled with sorting at source. We also saw that since 2015, the awareness raised regarding waste management issues, so people started talking about recycling. We've had several grassroots movements, the level of civil society organization, or even at the level of municipalities with some success stories. However, at the national scale, we still have a problem. So this leads to us asking why we still have a solid waste issue today if we know technically what the solution is. We're talking about circular economy, we're talking about sorting at source, having an integrated solid waste strategy. So why do we still have this problem until today? So in the paper, I discussed post-war political system is the root cause of our problem, actually. So we've had this problem for a while, and it is labeled as a chronic problem. Chronic problem is a problem that keeps resurfacing despite attempts at trying to solve it, which we've seen with the solid waste issue. And usually in what we call a systems analysis, chronic problems stem from complex systems. So whenever we have complex systems, they are manifested by chronic problems. So when we talk about the case of solid waste management, why do we have complex systems within the solid waste management system? As also the minister just showed in his presentation, there is a multitude of stakeholders. So you saw how many decision-making sides there are when it comes to solid waste, and this only increases the complexity of the problem. And here I'd like to point out that complex doesn't mean complicated. A complicated problem usually has a technical solution. It means that it might be a bit hard, it needs more research, more testing. But in the case of a complex problem, it means that there are many components that are interconnected together and interact together. And we do not need to simplify this problem. We just need to understand its complexity in order to know where we need to intervene and how. So why do I also say that the post-war political system is the root cause? Because due to the post-war Taif agreement and the politics of muhasaza or quotas that was born due to this Taif agreement, which divides the different, if you want, agreements based on the different religious sects in Lebanon, it's not any issue or any problem related to the public sector is not anymore based, or any policy that's developed is not based on evidence-based, scientific, technical solution, but it's always based on power sharing and the post-war warlords, if I may call them, and their elite groups that are trying to divide the cheese. And finally, this sector is also interconnected with other sectors, which would also increase the complexity of the issue at hand. So all the measures that were taken previously to solve this problem, or the attempts at solving this problem, were not targeting the root cause. They were targeting the symptoms of the problem. And as I said, this problem is a chronic problem, and usually chronic problems stem from complex systems. And it's true that the solid waste management system in Lebanon is complex, but it's a resilient system. And usually when we talk about resilience, we talk about it in a positive sense. But here, if we want to look at the scientific definition of resilience, resilience is not necessarily a desirable attribute. System configurations that decrease social welfare, such as polluted water supplies or dictatorships, can be highly resistant to change. It means that a resilient system is one that resists change, that can withstand shocks, no matter how many interventions or attempts to change that happen to it, it can go back to its status quo. So in the paper, to dissect this problem further, I adopted the systems thinking approach. And to understand more what is the systems thinking approach, I will briefly define what's a system. A system is a set of elements that are interconnected to achieve a goal or a purpose. So the goal or the purpose, again, here is not necessarily positive. And the three very important elements of the definition are elements, interconnection, and purpose. So whenever we are analyzing a specific problem or a specific issue, we need to identify what are the elements within that system, how they're interconnected together, and what is the purpose they're achieving, which in this case is a problematic behavior. So if we want to change the problematic behavior, we need to identify these elements and these interconnection to be able to change them. And one very important characteristic of complex systems is that the structure, which are the elements and their interconnections, as represented below, determine the behavior. So this is, if you want, the rationale that was adopted during the paper. And in the paper, what we call a causal loop diagram, as shown here, which shows the causal linkages between the different elements that were identified and analyzed, are shown here in this figure. And we'll go very briefly through it, through the different feedback loops. So what we call feedback loop is what consists of elements that are linked together through cause and effect relationships in such a way that they form or create a closed ring of causal influences. So you see, it's like we are stuck in a loop that keeps repeating itself. And usually these feedback loops are the driving force of any behavior in a complex system. So it's very important to identify them, and based on this analysis, to understand where and how the interventions need to be made for policy design, for strategy design, and so on. So the first loop that was identified is the elite capture loop. And it was analyzed by starting by looking at the level of corruption. So whenever the level of corruption in a certain public authority or any kind of public institution increases, the control over government revenues is increased, and the manipulation of public expenses is in turn increased. They have more access and more ability to manipulate public expenses. And then the allocation of public expenses is done to political subgroups, which constitute the elite groups that surround those in power today. And of course, these people will support, now we have the parliament elections coming up in a couple of weeks. So of course, right now, all these political campaigns are supported by these private sector or allies of these people in power, and they get re-elected and they keep manipulating public goods. The second loop, which is actually, if you look at the outer part of the causal loop diagram, is clientelism. And here as well, we see that there is an allocation of whenever the public goods are allocated to people not based on merit, but based on connections and profit, the quality of public service provided will decrease, which means that people are more vulnerable, and marginalized communities will be even more vulnerable. So they will have to rely on alternative service provisions, whether by the private sector or by others. Such as the political parties and so on, which weakens again public institutions, and we get stuck again in this vicious cycle. The same thing happens whenever we lose, and now Lebanon has been facing a major brain drain. So we lose the people who are able to actually make a change and improve the situation. And finally, again, increasing the vulnerability makes the population get stuck in a poverty trap. So in order to analyze or study how this has impacted the solid waste sector specifically, because the causal loop diagram I've just shown can be, in fact, applied to any public sector in Lebanon. So in the paper, the second part focuses on the experiences of municipalities in the solid waste sector. And I will just go briefly, I won't cover this part because I know we're running out of time. The three municipalities that were interviewed and studied are, the first one is Beit Mari, So in Beit Mari, as most of you I'm sure know, there is a public-private partnership that's currently running between the municipality and Cedar Environmental. And despite the success of this model, following the interview with the mayor, he was saying that due to the hyperinflation and the increased cost of treatment because of the increased cost in fuel and so on, if the municipal fees are not revised, they won't be able to pay Cedar Environmental anymore, and this will risk that the operations will stop completely. So as I've already said, if despite the success stories, if we do not have a real solution that is targeting the root cause of the problem and not the symptom, in the long run, or even in the mid run, the problem will resurface again. In the case of Tuhur Shwer, the approach was different. It was also to see and to analyze the symptomatic solutions. So back in 2015, there was an incinerator that was also purchased with the impression that if we just throw in everything into the incinerator, this will solve the solid waste issue and the solid waste crisis back then. However, because this intervention was not studied and analyzed properly, there was a lot of resistance from residents there, and now the incinerator is not working. And despite that, today even the municipality in Tuhur Shwer is partnering with Lebanon Waste Management, which is also an organization that works on sorting at source, but it's on a voluntary basis. Only 20% of the population has a membership on waste management. So as long as there is another solution that is not targeting the root cause of the problem while not having proper regulations implemented, people will not adhere. Finally, there was this of a small municipality, Brih, that was discussed. It is truly a special case because Brih, despite it being a small town, it has a successful model for solid waste management, which was completely run and established by the municipality there. So the challenges faced is that they had to do everything themselves. They had to learn all the technical requirements to establish a solid waste system, and there was no support from the central government at any stage. And actually, they received some grants from international donors in order to upgrade their facility now. But it is a successful case. However, there is a small thing that I would like to point out, and this is during an event that was done end of last year by HBS and ARI. We learned that Brih was able to reclaim the fees that it was supposed to be paying to Suclean in debt. And during the interview with the mayor, he did confirm this, but we found out that actually this was supported by a prominent political figure, and without his support, they wouldn't have been able to get to reclaim these fees. So again, here we can see that political decision-making and politics is a major player in whenever it comes to the success of any intervention. So what we see here is...
Cynthia,
sorry.
You should maybe start wrapping up. Sorry
Okay.
to interrupt you.
No worries. So I will just go very quickly. This is a framework for the implementation of circular economy practices at the level of a town or a country. And we see that most of the levers here identified require political decision-making. So whenever we look again at this causal loop diagram and we identify the different levers that need to be implemented, and they are aligned with what Minister Nasser Yassin said, whether it's having accountability and transparency and going towards decentralization and empowerment of local governments and having a participatory approach with inclusion taken into account and the integration with the waste sector with other sectors. Unfortunately, no matter how well the plan is drafted, if we do not have political support, political decision-making, rule of law, and accountability and transparency during implementation, we will keep facing the same issues, and the problem will remain a chronic problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, and sorry again for rushing you. راح ننتقل هلا
We will give the floor now to the third speaker, Amani Maalouf. And before giving Amani the floor, someone asked about Cynthia's paper. This paper hasn't been published yet, and we will let you know as soon as we publish it, and we will be sending it to you, of course, sending it to all those who are participating in this webinar as soon as the paper is published. Amani, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to provide an overview of global waste management and challenges in developing economies. First, I'll provide an overview of global waste generation, then the progress in municipal solid waste infrastructure delivery. Third, we're going to answer the question, can we reduce or eliminate uncontrolled waste disposal worldwide? And finally, circular economy and challenges of waste management in developing economies. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to highlight the main misconceptions of waste management. So to start with and provide an overview globally about waste management, we have to know how much total waste do we produce worldwide. Limited studies have provided an efficient and comprehensive global estimate because data reported is globally inconsistent due to varying interpretation of terminology, lacking standardized categories, and varying methodologies used to observe and measure the waste amount. To give you an example, we have reviewed 5 major international reports, for example, from UNEP, World Bank, etc., that provide an estimate of the waste generated at global level within the period of 2006 to 2018. And our review showed that all of these reports have reported an amount of waste generated within this period to be around 2 billion tons per year. The reported value is problematic because the world population increased almost 1 billion person, which is equivalent to 15% increase, and the GDP per capita increased by 30% between 2006 and 2018. So this highlights a main issue in estimating the amount of waste that is being generated at global level. And to address this problem, this study employs regression analysis and material flow analysis approaches to ensure a cross-comparability of waste generation data. So to start with, we have to assess the total waste that is being generated. For that, we have adopted the material flow analysis approach, which links the resources that are being extracted at a global level with the total waste arising. And this study showed that worldwide, it is estimated that we generate around 19.8 billion tons currently. 20 to 22% of the resources that are being extracted worldwide end up as waste. And the main sector contributing to this waste is mining waste, which is like contributing the most in comparison to other sectors. The total global waste generated is expecting, according to this study, to grow to 46 billion tons by 2050 as a business as usual scenario. And currently, we produce 2.7 billion tons of municipal solid waste. This figure reflected an increase up to 50% in the waste generating during the last 15 years from 2004 to 2019. And the municipal solid waste generated is expected to grow to 4.5 billion tons by 2050. One of the main highlights of this study is that municipal solid waste represent only 10% of the total waste that's being generated. So despite its great importance, this sector, the municipal solid waste, has a very small share to the total waste generated. And it has its own contribution to our daily life. However, focusing only on municipal solid waste stream is misleading, especially when we target the circular economy discussion. So the focus on circular economy should be on the total waste that is being generated from all the stages of the life cycle of every product and not only on the municipal solid waste. To put it in another context, at the level of the EU, Eurostat has reported that the waste that is being generated by all economic activities and households amounted to 2,500 million tons, which is 25% of it is related to mining waste. For a comparison, household waste was just 8.5% of the total waste that's being generated, which is almost 1/3 of the mining waste. Now I move to the progress in municipal solid waste infrastructure that is being delivered worldwide. And to provide an overview of the infrastructure delivery, we conducted another study and we collected data from 160 countries and more, including projects for waste disposal, treatment, recovery facility projects, to provide a more accurate indication of the progress of infrastructure that's being delivered worldwide. We have only considered projects in the phase of implementation further in our analysis. And these projects present a total investment of $67 billion for the period 2014-2019. In terms of capacity, the total size of implemented projects is about 243 million tons for the 6 years, which is equivalent to an average annual delivery rate of 14 million tons per year, or almost 2% of the global annual waste generated. So also the study showed that in this period, developing countries were home only to 9% of the waste management infrastructure. And the highest share of the total new municipal solid waste infrastructure delivered was attributed to high-income countries, accounting for about 45%. This highlights that development is outpacing the waste infrastructure required to support it. And the largest share in terms of capacity of new implemented projects is related to thermal technologies, about 57%, followed by recycling facilities, and the rest for landfilling and other projects. So can we reduce or eliminate uncontrolled waste disposal worldwide? Based on what I have presented before, the new municipal solid waste infrastructure capacity was around 243 million tons. High-income countries delivered 45% of this capacity. And reasonably, these projects we're considering upgrading of existing facilities, expansion of landfills, and or establishment of new treatment facilities. So how can we reduce or eliminate uncontrolled waste disposal, especially in developing countries? To answer this question, a simple model was developed that takes into account the progress in municipal solid waste infrastructure that is being delivered to eliminate uncontrolled disposal and the additional waste that's being generated between 2020 and 2030. And it also presents the evolution of uncontrolled waste disposal practices worldwide during this period. And it is expected that uncontrolled disposal will continue to rise until 2030, reaching almost 960 million tons per year, while the new infrastructure delivered will rise by 2% annually under an optimistic scenario. To put it in another way,
Amani, are you still with us?
sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I
Now
will
we
share
can.
again my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will repeat, we are living the end of business as usual in waste management due to the new geopolitical order of our world, but also what we have 5 major trends that redefine what we call waste management. The first one is global warming, where waste management can substantially contribute to carbon dioxide emission reductions. The second is a circular economy, which is a global trend that redefines the relationship between the economic activities and their environmental footprint. The third is the marine litter, where plastic pollution is becoming a planetary challenge like global warming. The third is the end of dirty recycling, bringing new emphasis in the quality of recyclables. And at center is the Industrial 4.0, which redefine raw materials, manufacturing, and waste. Industrial 4.0 and circular economy will determine the future of waste industry. We always want to apply the waste hierarchy that you are all familiar with, that you can see in this slide. How can we improve our system? The problem is that the system focuses heavily on the post-consumer waste management. So in many municipalities, the waste arrive at the waste bin, and then we start downstream the waste bin to improve the system. We do not interact sufficiently enough with the stakeholders upstream the waste bin, and that leads to the effect that the burden of waste management is given to municipalities, which do not have the expertise and do not have the capacities needed to socialize the services by fee system things, which do not work in developing countries. So what could we do? This is how we should rethink and go into a new direction. We have to consider and to address the entire value chain, starting from material extraction, what material we use, going to design and production stage, addressing consumption with consumers, of course, to establish a circular economy. So the so-called post-consumer waste management sector should become a new field that should not be called waste management anymore. It should be called strategies. And as we see here, Ellen MacArthur Foundation has introduced this recently to the world. And Habib Maalouf introduced this into Lebanese context in his articles back in the 1990s. We have to out-design waste. We have to out-design it upstream of the waste bin, and we have to in-price recycling services and environmental impact of the life cycle of product, which would free the municipalities from the burden of what we call waste management. We should not only design for consumption, but we should also design for a longer lifetime, for less harmful materials, for better reuse, for repair. And if we integrate all sectors and the total waste generated, not only focusing on the municipal solid waste, maybe this way the future of waste management will not be only climate neutral, but also could be a role model for our new economy. And to conclude, from the overview that I have provided in our studies, the UN SDG 12.4 target could not be met by 2020, and urgent policy interventions are required. The closure of dump site by 2030 requires an increase in the capacity of municipal solid waste infrastructures being delivered in developing countries by 4-fold. And the full-scale deployment of circular economy represent a radical change. And as such, especially considering the functioning of our economic systems, it requires innovative ways of rethinking the production system and consumptions. And I believe that, to speak about the local context, that Lebanon could be a role model in this field, because it's a country that is mainly relying on importing, and we're not an industrial country. And this is through the proper policies and strategies and regulations set at the government level, and by adapting a new economic model that we can make this change, and not to what we have arrived currently, which is a shame, as in the photo that we are seeing now from what we call dump site of Jdeide. Thank you.
Thank you, Amani, for the very insightful presentation. That leaves us with around 30 minutes for Q&A. فيلي عنده أسئلة please استعملوا Q&A box. I think
if you have questions, you can write them in the Q&A box. I guess there's a question addressed to Dr. Yassin, if I'm not mistaken, but the question was already answered in the chat box. You can still answer it now.
Is it already established? I understood it needs operational decrease. Its operational budget, is it covered from the MOE budget?
لا ما تأسست بعد أو لم تعين لأنه
No, it hasn't been appointed yet. We still need the decrees for that. This has been discussed by the Council of Ministers recently, and the State Council started discussing it. So there are procedures that need to be followed. We hope that we will be able to have a decree, an execution or an executive decree for that very soon. After that, this authority will be appointed. We will have, of course, appointments that are made, different candidates, CVs that should be submitted. So we're working on a step-by-step basis. This law hasn't been implemented for the past 2 years, and we're trying to implement it and to work on its implementation now during these few months. Budgets can be allocated by the state or by other entities, and there will be a different budget for that authority. Thank you. There's another question addressed to all the speakers, if I'm not mistaken, from Atif Idris.
So why can't we mandate small and medium enterprises complying with the EMS requirements? Moreover, why can't we not mandate polluting institutions to address ISO 14000 requirements? I don't know, إذا حدا حابب يجاوب على هالسؤال. The floor is yours.
في أنا جاوب بسرعة أستاذ عاطف. نحن عم نشجع.
I can answer briefly. Mr. Atif, we are encouraging decentralization and managing this sector. We are encouraging the current initiatives, and we have more and more initiatives, and we have many startups that started working on recyclables. There are many initiatives that have been launched, initiatives related to door-to-door collection or drop-off centers even have been created. Level of Recycle Lebanon, we use many entities, many stakeholders are now working on a small scale, and these initiatives can be mainstreamed. I think that we can work on another approach. This hasn't been cited in my presentation. Cynthia might have talked about that. So we might have to work sometimes with some stakeholders. However, we might face the problem of elite capture and other problems and challenges. So when we talk about decentralization, about local solutions, we mean that there should be solutions adopted at the local level by municipalities. There should be local initiatives aimed at managing this sector. Even in cities like Beirut, we're working now with the governor of Beirut in order to divide the region into more than one part so that we can work on the collection, on the sorting, have a system for sorting, another system for organic waste, and another for the mixed waste. So if we divide Beirut into various sectors, things might be easier the idea of having one big contractor working all over Lebanon is not a very good idea, mainly amidst the current situation, and this is becoming less and less feasible.
إذا ممكن أنا كمان أحب أزيد بس على قصة bottom up.
I have one thing to add regarding the bottom-up approach. I have mentioned that in my paper, but unfortunately, this is not enough. It's not enough to have a bottom-up approach because at the end of the day, all these initiatives are unable to sustain themselves financially. So the bottom-up needs to be coupled with top-down, and the Ministry of Environment should play its role, monitoring role.
وبعتقد هيدا أول مرة يعني من وقت ما
And I think that this is the first time that the Ministry of Environment is adopting this approach. I think that Mr. Yassin is engaging with civil society organizations and while working on national strategy.
الأشياء بتاخد وقت يعني كمان ما بعرف قديش رح يلحقوا كمان هلا.
However, these things take time. I don't know whether the current minister and the current ministry will be able to implement that plan, and we hope that we will be able to see Mr. Nasser Yassin again in the new government that will be formed.
شكرا سينتيا. أماني حابة تزيد شيء عن
Thank you, Cynthia Amani. Do you have anything to add?
Okay, Amani is having trouble with the connection. It's not a problem. There's a following question, the follow-up question بخصوص ال Waste Management Authority. وعم بيسألوا إذا هل authority will be stopped if there is any political shift after the elections. So بركي I think هلا سينتيا حكيت يعني شوي عن الموضوع بس ما بعرف إذا
توقف انه تو ستوب انه ما تتعين يعني او
بعتقد هيك مقصود.
شوف اللي عم يشتغلوا
What do you exactly mean by will the authority be stopped? Do you mean that the members won't be appointed? My answer is we will have a decree, an executive decree for the authority. The nominations, of course, of the members will have to wait. This will take eventually time. We need to have an open call to gather the candidate CVs and look into these CVs and everything else. We still need to see how things will go, how the political situation will be, but we cannot say that this will be suspended or stopped. So no, we need competent people to be able to manage that sector. And this is a very important step towards a good governance. SDR, AMSAR, municipalities, different entities and stakeholders are working on different parts of solid waste management. This is why we need to have an integrated policy and an authority that can regulate the work of all these entities. I can give you here an example. We have obsolete data. After everything we've been going through with the solid waste crisis, we're still using data that is not accurate or that is built around estimates. We don't have a good organized waste information system that is open to everyone, and even for decision makers. They're relying on estimations, on estimates. We should have a good, organized, transparent waste information system. This waste information system needs to be well structured, and this will be part of the authority's work. So the authority will be eventually managing this system. There have been many decrees, and there will be many decrees, many circulars about the different details of the project, we will have probably many terms of references that will be developed, and all these will be the prerogatives of the authority. We're currently trying to help the Beirut municipality that is working on that. We're working more in an ad hoc manner. However, all the work we're doing now can be something that will be a responsibility that will be assumed by the authority. So no, the authority won't be stopped. We're being practical now. We're trying practically to work on implementing some of the tasks that should be implemented by the authority. But when the authority is formed and when the members are appointed, they will be working on these. Some questions from Nadim.
Did you encounter any political opposition to set up the solid waste management authority? هذا أول سؤال. وتاني سؤال, has the crisis reduced the profitability of the sector, which in turn reduces elite capture and thus opening possibility for new solutions? وfinally, تالت سؤال, did any of the political parties adopt clear positions on solid waste management? فإذا بتحب تجاوب على هول الأسئلة وحتى كمان يعني باقي البانل إذا they have an opinion on this, don't hesitate.
Excellent questions. لا ما في أي تدخل
These are
سياسي.
excellent questions. No, we haven't encountered any political interference in the formation of the authority. After that, when members of the authority will be appointed, I don't know whether this will happen or not. Eventually, the government, the future government will have to appoint the members of the authority. So I don't know how the final nominations will be made, but up until now, there is no political interference in the organization of the authority and our work. Another thing, the sector now has been going through some difficult conditions. Yes, some of the contractors have lost the profitability. Yes, the fact that in Beirut, for example, in Matan and Amrusiye, we haven't been having true sorting, which is reducing the profitability. And the waste pickers are as well reducing the profitability of these contractors. Waste picking should be organized in a better manner. So yes, we have reduced profitability. So it's not a very profitable sector anymore, but we're insisting on still running that sector with the minimum possible. As I was saying, when I started working on that file, I said that 2022 will be a transitional phase for us. As Cynthia was saying, we cannot solve all our problems directly. We will have 3 years of gradual transformation towards a more integral waste management system. Local stakeholders will have a stronger role and will be working with municipalities on managing that sector. It is very important to encourage startups, to encourage local initiatives, to encourage the shared responsibility between local community members and local municipalities. Cynthia and Amani, I don't know if Amani is still here. I don't know if you have any contribution, anything to add. I had a small comment. This is one of the leverage points in the paper.
opportunities لأنه بالنهاية this is a crisis. يعني يمكن فينا نقول silver lining إنه من وراء financial crisis.
We can't talk about opportunities, but there is a silver lining because of the lira devaluation, because of the crisis.
بطل شيء مربح يعني
Nothing is profitable anymore for the contractors.
هلا يكون هيدا الشيء عم
This
نستفيد منه لحتى نكون عم نبلش نطلع بحلول
should
بديلة،
be
حلول مستدامة.
something that we take
فأكيد this is a
advantage from,
turning
if you could
point
say so,
يعني.
to find
هلا يمكن
long-term
آخر
solutions.
سؤال
This is a turning
موجه
point.
للوزير، أنا صراحة ما رح أقدر أجاوب عليه.
The last
Did any
question
other political
was a
parties
question
have clear
addressed
positions
to the
on waste
minister.
management?
طيب حجاوب بسرعة. ثانك يو سينثيا. بتعرفوا انه مفاجأة، ما بعرف اذا مفاجأة، بس انه انا فاجأني قديش ضعيفة
Surprisingly enough,
المواضيع البيئية
topics related to the environment are not very present in the candidates' programs across different across the political spectrum, if I could say so. We barely see candidates talking about environmental topics, except for Ziad Abi Shakir, Najat Saliba, and other candidates who are experts in the field. But apart from that, in general, in the programs, we rarely see candidates talking clearly about this topic of this waste management topic in their programs. This is in fact a huge responsibility. I would like to stress on the importance of the parliamentary elections that will be held in 2 or 3 weeks. This is a democratic process that is very important, yes, but the municipal elections are as important because in the solid waste management topic, we need to have strong municipalities that are aware of the problem, that are able to manage this sector in an integrated manner. Yes, the current law doesn't allow for complete decentralization, but municipalities can start implementing decentralization while working on the waste management sector. Municipalities are assuming great responsibilities. They lack resources, but the head of the municipal councils and the municipal councils in general should assume this responsibility because they are at the forefront, they're the frontliners, if you could say so, in this topic. As Cynthia was saying, we've seen huge contractors controlling this sector with local government. However, we should stress again on the importance of decentralization, strengthening the municipal councils, and electing members of municipalities that can manage this sector.
ما بعرف إذا هلا مش الحال
Yes.
Good. يا حابة أن
Amani,
أسأل سؤال على الصعيد اللوكال كونتكست
I have
للوزير بما إنه بعد ما
a question about the local context to Minister Nasser Yassin. After having talked about the current strategy, and as I had already said, you're shedding light on different problems. We're talking about the post-consumer waste management. We're talking about the contractors, about the composting, about problems with the municipalities, about all these issues. While the solution might be elsewhere, we should look at the upstream, not only at the post-consumer waste management. How is cooperation between this ministry and other ministries in order to find the right solutions to everything we're importing? And even Sareen was asking about what's happening and mainly related to accurate data. Do we have accurate data? Are we generating evidence based on accurate data? So what's happening on the upstream level? I will be brief. We are working with the Ministry of Industry on organizing the use of many of these products, cardboard, paper. We're discussing that with the industrialists, with the recyclers, with the sorting facilities regarding plastic as well. We will start discussing that very soon. Regarding tires, for example, we have around 1 million tires that are used in Lebanon, and there is no clear policy regarding the use of tires. Some are burning these tires that use the different components, but this is extremely dangerous. So we're working with the Ministry of Industry on that. We're cooperating with the industrialists as well in order to deal with the different streams. And we're communicating as well with the waste producers. We've been working as well on the legislative level, but we still don't have a full organization at this level. The Ministry of Environment should approve or not imports related to cardboard, to rubber, to many other material. And in general, we always seek to implement all the international agreements, mainly the Basel Agreement. Regarding construction waste or bulky waste, these are being organized as well one by one. And we're now discussing the topic of electronic waste, the solar panels and other kinds of waste. So yes, so we're talking about that. We're looking into the impact of this waste and different waste streams on health and on the environment.
أماني حابة تزيد شيء؟
Amani, do you have anything else to add? Thank you, Christophe. As Minister Yassin was saying, the problem is with the management of the sector. This is not something only related to the Ministry of Environment. This is a work that should be done by different relevant ministries and by the state in general. The Ministry of Environment works or has a major role to assume here and a major responsibility to assume, but all ministries and the state should develop a sustainable plan for Lebanon.
Thank you. في سؤال سألته سمر خليل. هاي سمر.
Samar Khalil just asked a question. Since Cynthia's paper did not tackle Zahle, she might have, however, some insight about that.
Why they were able to manage waste and electricity to some extent, while most of the other municipalities failed. Cynthia, do you have some insight about this question?
No, I don't have any specific insights about Zahle municipality, but it's definitely an interesting case to look at. But I've looked at other cases, not all of them are published in the paper, and most of the time, the main takeaway is that whatever model was implemented, it's not replicable or it's not scalable, because we still lack this national guideline. We still lack. So it would be interesting to look at the case of Zahle, of course, but I doubt that, for instance, it would be replicable in Beirut, or it would be replicable somewhere else without any major changes at the central level. So this is a very brief answer.
No problem. ما بعرف إذا حدا تاني عنده كمان some insight.
I don't know if anyone else has insights about this?
Okay. في a general question كمان يعني بعتقد في كل البانل اللي يجاوب عليه بس ما بعرف
Another general question all the panelists can answer. I don't know if Adel can give us more information about this question.
And so if you can give us a bit more detail about what you mean, it would be great. Another question كمان هو about the cost of energy, the recycling firms, and whether support will be provided, such as subsidy for energy or new technologies, and which ministry is responsible for that. That's an interesting question.
بموضوع موضوع الاندستري لا ما في subsidies يعني we're moving from the subsidies
regarding the industry we're moving from the subsidies program.
The Ministry of Energy هلا ممكن يكون في بعض ال يعني packages
There might be some packages provided, but now we're facing a huge energy problem because we're relying mainly on diesel, on polluting energy. So we still have to find alternative energy sources across all sectors. So this is why costs are increasing in many plants. Some costs are and some resources are allocated for solar systems and solar system panels, but besides that, there are no subsidies and no plans in terms of energy. Thank you. I have a question to all the speakers. If we're talking about an integrated solid waste management, about a national strategy, what is the role of the waste pickers of the informal sector in the strategy? Should we organize this sector? Should they be integrated in the plan across the process?
أنا رأيي لازم يكون في دور
In my opinion, the informal sector should play an important role. Now their role is not well organized, and there are some negative reactions because people are saying things that are not acceptable for them in the streets, and this has increased with the economic crisis and with the waste crisis when the plants started working. And now there are many challenges, many security challenges, and many problems between the waste pickers and those who are working in the Jdeida landfill. Anyway, I think that the solution is to organize this sector. Municipalities should organize work in this sector, and work would be eventually semi-structured, that there will be a sort of system. These waste pickers might perhaps have some cards, might be integrated in the system. This can reduce this negative perception of these waste pickers. And eventually, we cannot but acknowledge the role played by these waste pickers because they are reducing the quantities of waste going towards the plants. So recently, we've been stressing a lot on hardwares, having plants, landfills, having contractors, but we have rarely seen people working on softwares, as I call them, about changing the mindset, about how to deal with the informal sector, about how to deal with the different landfills. So we don't see anyone, neither municipalities nor other formal authorities working on these softwares. We think more about the hardwares, about building, about getting cars, vehicles, rather than changing mindsets and breaking some stigmas, if you could say so. This might not be easy, but I can assure you that we need to work with the local community members, with the civil society organizations, exactly like we're seeing personal or individual initiatives. We need to mainstream other initiatives, and we need to promote work with the municipalities in order to organize this informal sector. We have to wrap up in 2 minutes. There's a question from Mr. Idris. No, we're not neglecting the Litani pollution. Ever since I was appointed minister, I've been discussing that problem. The Litani project hasn't been implemented during the past years. The implementation was extremely slow. There was a World Bank loan related to the Karaun Lake and to the Litani River. Ever since I was appointed, I've been trying to finalize the work on this loan and to implement eventually this project. We're working now on contracts related to the sanitation sector, and there was a plant in Anjar that got a contract in order to start managing the sanitation waste. Another network is being worked on as well in Jibjaneen and in other regions. But the Ministry of Energy and Water is responsible for that as well. We are a ministry that works on environment, on fighting pollution, protecting the sources of water, but the different water establishments and the Ministry of Water and Energy is in charge of that file as well. Waste, we were able to work as well
مفاوضات ولكن ماشيين فيه وعم نشتغل مع وزارة الصناعة بمشروع آخر مرتبط بموضوع negotiations with the Ministry of Industry, and we're working with them, with the Ministry of Industry, in order to solve the problem of different plants and factories that were built around the river. So let's be responsible whenever we say anything. If we truly want to be responsible, we need to choose our words wisely. There was a comment related to recycling and municipalities.
We should start to wrap up. Sorry Amani. بس يعني إذا فيك يعني go ahead ومن بعدها من
Amani, we need to wrap up, so can you please be brief? I have one final point. This is another misconception related to recycling and decentralized activities. Some say that there is a small financial cost and a huge financial benefit. This is misleading, mainly in developing countries such as Lebanon, because costs from the source separation or the processing of the material is 4 or 5 times bigger than the revenues of recycling. There's another misconception about recycling being the solution and about the recycling being
only a responsibility that need to be assumed by the municipalities. So this is my answer to one of the questions.
Thank you, Amani.
Thank you, Amani. I would like to thank Mr. Nasser Yassin, Dr. Amani Maalouf, and Mr. Cynthia Kreidy. Thank you. I hope that you were able to benefit from the information of this webinar. And I hope that we'll be seeing you in future webinars when we tackle other topics. Cynthia's paper will be shared as soon as possible with you. Thank you.
شكرا كريستوف
شكرا جميعا.
Thank you.
مع السلامة.
Merci. Bye bye.